The trap 3 raise is a very important exercise to building and maintaining healthy shoulders. It might not look like much, and frankly at first it might not feel like much, but being able to improve lifts like your bench press and your overhead press depend on it. For some perspective, what we're trying to do with the trap 3 raise is to get some work with a particular portion of the trapezius muscle. You probably think of your traps as the muscle that sort of runs between your neck and shoulder, but it's actually a good deal bigger than just that. It's a fairly big triangle-shaped muscle that runs about halfway down your back. The lower portion of the trapezius is called the trap 3, hence the name of this lift. The trap 3 raise doesn't get a lot of attention, presumably because you can't really see the lower portion of your traps. I certainly know that nobody's ever complimented me on the inferior fibers of my trapezius. That, plus a general lack of understanding as to why it's important, and it's easy to see why it doesn't get much respect. But it is important. The lower traps help to control and depress your scapula, and that's really important in keeping your shoulders healthy and maximizing performance on pressing movements. So for the sake of safety and buoying your other lifts, we should give the trap 3 raise some attention. Now, if that wasn't already hard enough to consider, the trap 3 raise is actually pretty nuanced. There are more than a few places where it's easy to slip up, so let's run through a few quick tips to make sure you're performing them correctly. Firstly, make sure you begin each individual repetition with a retraction and depression of your shoulder blades. In other words, squeeze your shoulders back and down. That's really the function we're trying to improve, so it's important to emphasize it with each and every repetition. Secondly, keep your arms straight as you do these. It's very, very tempting to bend the elbow, even a little bit, because that shortens the lever and makes the lift easier. Plus, it allows other muscles that run down your arm to contribute. In order to really keep your elbow extended, you'll probably find that you need to use less weight than you think. Really, very little load. Third, mind the tempo. Momentum with these lifts kills any benefit that they might yield. You might see these types of lifts written with a slower tempo in the up phase, or sometimes a pause at the top. It's critical to make sure that you're not simply swinging the weight upward, because then you're just using the inertia of the dumbbell to get to the desired point. But the muscles in question are left largely unworked. And lastly for here, hand position. You want to perform these with a slightly supinated grip, that is, slightly underhand. Hold the dumbbell so that the end on top is pointing slightly to the outside. It's tempting to let your hand roll inward, but that largely takes the impetus off of the muscles that we're trying to tax. Well, I know it's a lot. It's especially a lot to keep in mind for an exercise that you very well might not have ever heard of before. All of this adds up to using very little weight for these. As you're getting started, 5 pounds is probably plenty. Make sure you can do these with perfect form before you start to add much more.